Hello and welcome to Kentucky Legal Aid. My name is Daniel Curry. My guest today is Mark Esterly. Mark is a staff attorney with Kentucky Legal Aid. Among the many things that Mark does is housing counseling, landlord-tenant disputes, a lot of consumer law, but today we're going to be talking about protection from foreclosure. Thank you for being with me today, Mark.
Well, glad to be here, Daniel.
To start out, what is it that Kentucky Legal Aid can do for individuals to help prevent foreclosure?
Okay. Kentucky Legal Aid, when a person contacts Kentucky Legal Aid and they're having problems with their mortgage payments, it's sometimes due to something unexpected, a death in the family, a loss of a job, unexpected medical bills. Kentucky Legal Aid can try to help that person budget their income and expenses, can try to inform the person of the loss mitigation options that might be available. And loss mitigation is especially available for FHA homes, but even homes that are not FHA also have loss mitigation options. Loss mitigation gives the person a chance to try to reinstate, to try to make that payment back. Or if they can't pay it all back at once, they may be able to have what's called a forbearance, in which case they could hold off until they get a tax refund, get the creditor to hold off and let them make the payment then. It's possible sometimes that the creditor or the mortgage company may modify the loan, stick the payments that are owing on to the end of the loan, or allow the interest rate to be dropped, but basically to modify and maybe make the mortgage payment less than that. For FHA, sometimes there's what's called a claim in advance, which is a loan from HUD to help the person out. If we cannot help the person to get that mortgage paid off, there's what's called a short sale, in which case if they cannot sell the property for all that is due and owing, they are allowed to get a cancellation of the amount that would be due and owing after they sold the property. And finally, there was called a deed in lieu of foreclosure, which would allow the person to deed the property back in lieu of not having the mortgage company foreclose. But we try to explain these options to the person who's experiencing difficulty because of their increase in expenses or loss of income, and then we try to contact the mortgage company to see if we might be able to work something out to help that person out.
So you're really giving people, you're informing them of what their options are and what's involved with each option. It sounds like you do a lot of negotiations.
Yes. We try to make a lot of contact with the mortgage companies for the person. It's helpful when a person comes to see us if they have their documents that show about their loan and their account number, information to show about their income and expenses, and to go over that with them and trying to inform them of the options that they have available.
One of the options you mentioned was having the outstanding mortgage amounts that they owe right now, having those go back into the principal of the loan. Is that how that works?
Well, there's some ways where the loan can be modified where the payment might be stuck back onto the end of the loan and have that.
So it would just be, the loan would have a greater life.
Right. It could
be paid out over a longer period of time.
Right. That's correct.
I understand. Now, we use this term around the office a lot, housing counseling. Can you give me a good definition of housing counseling?
Right. Kentucky Legal Aid is fortunate to receive funding from Department of Housing and Urban Development through West Tennessee Legal Services, and just recently we've also started to receive funding from NeighborWorks. But these are both to help people who are having problems either in rental housing, they're having problems with their landlord, or they're people who own their homes are having a problem making their mortgage payments, or any kind of question they might have related to the housing that they're in. And where a lot of our assistance with Kentucky Legal Aid is based on the poverty level, for persons who have questions about their housing because of this grant, it's not dependent upon the income they receive as far as them talking with us, trying to find out about their options, or us trying to make contact with the mortgage company or with the landlord on their behalf. If the case goes to court, however, of course, then the usual legal aid guidelines apply for the person at the poverty level. But for housing questions, people can come contact us if they have questions related to their landlord, related to their house, mortgage payments, so on, and we try to make contact, help to counsel them, and also to make contact with the mortgage company or with their landlord.
So the goal of housing counseling basically is to help that person stay in the dwelling that they're in, whether they own it or whether it's a rental property, just trying to keep them in a stable environment.
Right.
And I think I'm understanding that they don't necessarily have to be at or below the poverty level to have questions answered or to seek advice. It's only if they needed extended services that they would then have to financially qualify.
Absolutely right, Daniel.
Okay. Now, what should a person do if they know ahead of time that they are going to miss or be late on a mortgage payment? And that happens to everyone at some point or another due to some unforeseen, like you said, maybe an illness or the death of a family member, loss of a job. If you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are going to at least be late on a mortgage payment, what should that individual do immediately?
I'd say it'd be an excellent idea for that person to contact the lender, the mortgage company, just as soon as they can. They ought to have their paperwork available with their account number, have any documentation about their income and expenses to make contact to let that lender know that they're having problems, to see can they work something out to get caught up on the payments.
It seems like mortgage companies, it would be in their best interest to try to work with an individual rather than to start the lengthy foreclosure process or something drastic like that.
Right, and I think you're right, because the mortgage company has, if they have to go through foreclosure proceedings, they have to court costs and attorney's fees, so it costs them extra to go through the process. So you're right, it's in the mortgage company's best interest also to work with the person who's behind on in having troubles making those payments.
But the time to do that is not after you're 3 or 4 months in arrears. The time to do that is you don't want to wait to start trying to work with the mortgage company.
Right, you want to work as soon as you can, because like you say, that you don't want to get behind. The farther behind you get, the worse it gets that way. If they have to file in court, there are extra court costs and attorney's fees that the mortgage company is going to want the person who's behind to pay. So the sooner you get working with that mortgage company, the better.
Okay, now bankruptcy. How does bankruptcy play into home ownership and foreclosure?
Well, a person could file what's called a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, and in that kind of bankruptcy, there'd be a court order requiring basically the mortgage company to accept a payment plan to allow the person to get caught back up. That kind of bankruptcy could help a person save the home. A Chapter 7 bankruptcy, on the other hand, if a person could reaffirm their debt, that they'd be able to stay, but a Chapter 7 bankruptcy will not necessarily allow a person to keep the home. So Chapter 13 bankruptcy might be the best kind for a person to allow the person to keep the home. Depends on the circumstances.
I would imagine equity, how much equity they have.
Right. So if a person has questions about that, it'd be good for that person to contact a private attorney about, especially about Chapter 13 bankruptcy. People who have questions about bankruptcy in general, if they meet the eligibility guidelines of Kentucky Legal Aid, can make contact and ask questions about Chapter 7 and other bankruptcies too.
So unlike housing counseling, there are financial criteria associated with receiving services from legal aid for bankruptcy.
Right, that's correct.
Okay. Now, are there foreclosures that just simply cannot be prevented? I feel like there probably are. It's they've waited too long or because of the circumstances. What are foreclosures that it's a lost cause?
In some instances, people, because of the loss of income is so great to that person, or they've gone through a divorce, something like that, where they've just will not have enough income to make the mortgage payments, regardless of what the mortgage company might be able to do to lower the payments. So in an instance like that, they may not be able to prevent the bankruptcy, or they may have some extra liens against their home, unpaid medical bills, something else that caused other liens to be attached to the home that might not allow them to do the short sale or other sale of the home. So it might be that the mortgage foreclosure will be the only way that the case will be resolved, and unfortunately can't help out in every case.
I imagine that's hard news for some clients, but it just stands to reason. If you do have a dramatic change in your financial circumstances, you may be in a home that you realistically cannot